Professor Kerber, our expert on the history of coverture, is going to tell us a little bit about not only how women lived under coverture, but whether they benefited from it, and if not, how they resisted it. How did they manage? Now we're looking at the period, Linda, in the post-revolutionary period. So we're looking at the 1820s and the 1830s when life has settled down in the new republic.
Remember that coverture is the water these fish are swimming in. It's very hard to situate yourself against essentially the air you breathe. But I think one set of needs starts emerging, which is that in the aftermath of the war, Congress establishes systems of pensions for retired officers, certain kinds of payments to men who've been wounded in battle, but nothing for the widows of men who served in the American Revolution. And Congress has started to get petitions. Even during the war, they got petitions. There's a wonderful petition from Rachel Wells of New Jersey, who sends a message to Congress who says, I invested in Revolutionary War bonds, and after the war, actually it was Alexander Hamilton who decided that in order to curb speculation in the bonds, you couldn't get them back, you couldn't get payment if you'd moved out of the state in which you bought them. And she said, and she had done that, and she said, I suspected no trick. She said, I have done as much for the war. I may not have fought, but I bought the soldiers, it's badly spelled, food and clothing, and let them have blankets. And should not Rachel Wells get something? They get these petitions from women who are trying to articulate that they are owed something. They get petitions without number from women who feel that as widows of the war, they deserve some support. And they don't get any. So I think what builds up is a sense of entitlement, a sense of not being used well, that starts to emerge. And as by the 1820s and 30s, these women are going to start to find allies among men who are often their fathers, who are skeptical of dissolute sons-in-law. The economy is changing. More and more of it is cash. Less and less of it is stable land that doesn't change from one generation to the next. So what kind of right does a widow have on property that she brought to the marriage and that the husband sold out? And what is she going to get out of it ultimately at the end of that marriage? There's a lot of insecurity in the economy, and the fathers of those women and the brothers distrust the dissolute sons-in-law and want to get the property that they gave to their daughters solidly held by those married women.
Linda, I'm detecting something of a conflict here. A conflict between fathers who want their daughters to inherit property over which they have at least some control in order to make sure that their line benefits from their property, and the interests of sons-in-law or husbands who may or may not then be able to exercise the kind of control that we think coverture should have granted them.
Exactly. But in an insecure, unstable economy where husbands are worried about the debts that they have amassed, it's not so bad to have some property in the name of the wife that can't be reached for the debts of the husband. So some of this starts to get navigated. And the very first married women's property statutes protect, in Mississippi, the married woman's property in the slaves that she has inherited. It's not so liberal and charming as all that. And in the Northeast, often only the property she has inherited or been given, all the property she's been given, but not property that she has earned inside the marriage.
So
Very, very slowly and carefully.
but now
It's not generous.
I want to throw some clinkers into this. A man who abandons his family and goes out and gambles and gets into debt, and then the creditors come to the wife. After all, she's still married. Divorce is almost impossible to get. She's still responsible for his debts.
Right.
The same man could come back 5 years later and demand that 3 children in their teenage years who had been small should come with him to whatever he is and still leave his wife. She has no right over that. So coverture seems to me increasingly to be an imprisonment, an absence of movement for women.
Absolutely. It remains in there. It is also very variable from state to state on how the statutes are written and how forcefully they're enforced, because you can have all the statutes you want if the courts will not, if she doesn't have easy access to the courts. And now we have the story of Mrs. Odell's piano. So in Iowa, in a river town on the Mississippi in Iowa, Mrs. Odell is married to Mr. Odell, who's a banker, a small town banker, who has debts and then he pays them and so forth. She inherits land from her father. There is a Married Women's Property Act. She understands that this is her land. She sells the land, she gets cash, she goes to Chicago, she buys a piano. She has the piano shipped across the Mississippi. It's her piano. Well, it turns out that he has debts and they come and they repossess the piano. How can they do that? Because in the Iowa Married Women's Property Law, there was a little line that said that she needed, when she had the piano, to go down to the county courthouse and sign it up, register that piano as owned by her own personal property. And since she hadn't known that she had to do that, it's his piano.
It's his piano, and she loses it.